Hi everyone, I'm Zach Reinhardt, here to review the new woopheadclrms album, Kamechiyo.
Woopheadclrms, if that is the way you pronounce this name with 5 consonants strung together at the end, is an experimental music producer, electronic music producer from Aichi, Japan, who I have not ever heard of before. I chose this album because I realized that I haven't really been paying much attention on my channel, at least with my reviews, to the Japanese netlabel scene that is thriving on places like Bandcamp and SoundCloud. Labels like Omoide Label and Wasabi Tapes are constantly putting out some pretty interesting boundary pushing stuff in the kind of electronic music area. And so when I saw this new album come out on Wasabi Tapes, I thought I'd check it out, and it was suitably chaotic and somewhat nonsensical. And I thought I'd give it a review and, if not point you to this album, at least point you to what these labels are doing, because they're doing some interesting stuff. But getting into this album specifically, this is a somewhat hard to classify album. It draws elements of synthwave and vaporwave throughout, but also experiments with noise and just strange soundscape and manipulated vocal samples all over it, and these like sputtering synthesizers. It also clearly is drawing from artists like Foodman, who are really innovating in the juke scene. This thing kicks off with the track Dig, which was, I guess, the single for this album. It has a little music video that's real trippy up on YouTube. And it's experimental to the extreme. It has these echoing, just percussive noises that kind of fall in pitch as the echo goes on. And they make this sense of like kind of infinite falling, kind of cascading like a waterfall almost. But then it also has these kind of smooth, atmospheric, bell-like synth tones in the background that give it a more kind of musical edge, as well as a static bass line that kind of holds the thing together to a degree. Towards the end, it even brings in a drum beat and this kind of whining lead synthesizer for a while. And towards the very end, it brings in these kind of bells that have an almost like video game soundtrack-esque sound to them and are actually playing a melody, and it fades out from there. Now, there's a temptation to hear something this kind of wildly chaotic and experimental and write it off as being experimental for experiment's sake. And I think there's a degree of that, certainly. Like, he never really just does a straight-up song with a verse and a chorus or anything like that. It's always a very experimental soundscape in the songs, but there's something a little bit more to it, which I think makes this album really interesting. As the first track I just discussed exemplifies, this album attempts to straddle the line between music and just chaos and noise. With the exception of the 15-second noise interlude, Daub, every track on here really straddles the line between having melody and having a beat and having harmony and being complete unstructured chaos. Like the track 2017, which starts off with this noisy synthesizer that squeaks and chirps and creates these kind of walls of static. It sounds at the beginning almost like the intro to an Incapacitants song, but where the Incapacitants would take it in this completely harsh direction and turn it into this big wall of noise and chaos. But instead, on this track, we get some smooth electronic keyboards that fade in on the background, and some hand drums that add a little bit of a rhythmic element, but are never really allowed to lock in and create a firm beat. This song actually becomes really kind of serene and atmospheric over the course of its short runtime. And we also have the really strange and interesting song Moipon, which starts off with this just clutter of hand drums that are all just trying to play different beats on top of each other. They never really line up. They just make this rhythmic texture that provides a bed for the rest of the song to lay upon. We start getting these like manipulated and pitch shifted vocal samples of people talking and like this woman like saying something over a PA, it sounds like. And it turns into this really somewhat unstructured, somewhat chaotic soundscape. But about halfway through, you slowly start to hear some piano in the background and some saxophone, and I think even a little bit of drums. It's really faint. Then there's this wash that comes over the song, and the soundscape is now replaced with this choir of men singing, and a somewhat freeform, kind of improvised sounding saxophone solo going mad over top of it all. And there's this bed of noise under it, which serves as a grounding to bring us back to the beginning of the song with these kind of cluttered, chaotic drums, and the song goes out from there. It's a really interesting song, and I don't think I've ever really heard anybody do anything quite like this before. The song 8S-0 is equally intriguing. It samples the song Lucky Chance o Nigasanaide by the 70s pop trio Candies at the beginning. It manipulates this sample from the bright horn hits that it once was into this lurching, uneasy feeling rhythm and melody of some sort that then fades into this big wash of almost vaporwave. It has these slow, reverby drums and these very atmospheric synthesizers. And this low, like pitch shifted down speech starts appearing, and I'm not sure what it's saying. It's pretty unrecognizable, but it adds this kind of almost like you're in some sort of fever dream in like an old 80s mall and you're hearing like an advertisement over the PA. And then as that fades and fades, we are greeted with just a little bit of music of a sample I don't recognize, but it's got some piano and a little bit of guitar melody just in the background that guides us out at the end of the song, just teasing us with a little bit of concrete music, but it doesn't let it stick around very long.
And then on the more chaotic side, we have tracks like My Name is Muhammad, which has this like looping, almost like alarm clock sounding sample, and these ticking percussions that just kind of are thrown haphazardly around the track. And we also get this brief stab of some keyboards that add just a little bit of like a hint of music within it for just a second. And then it has this lead synth that covers the whole thing that sounds like a dying elephant. But for all of the chaos and all of the craziness, I think this is actually just a synth solo with some accompaniment. The song really showcases this wild, weird lead synthesizer that, like I said, kind of sounds like an elephant dying. But it frames the whole song around this synthesizer over the whole thing, and it has a little bit of percussion sprinkled in, and it has like an actual structure to it. It has a small breakdown in the midpoint, and I find this track really kind of intriguing to look at from that angle as like this kind of deconstruction of what a solo is. Whether it sounds good or not, I mean, I can't answer that question, but I do find it interesting. And those are just a few of the many interesting tracks on this 20-song album. I really recommend that if you're into experimental electronic stuff and into just weird soundscapey bits, then you should probably check this out. It's free. Well, it's pay what you want on Bandcamp. So, you can get it for free if you want. I recommend you support the artist, of course, as always, but, if you like the stuff. But I really find this album pretty interesting. I've only scratched the surface here, but it would just be way too long of a video to really dig into every track on here and describe all of the menagerie of strange sounds that appear on here. If you're a fan of Food Man and other kind of weird experimental people like that, this should be up your alley, I think. And that's me. I'm feeling I don't know, out of 10. It's a weird album, and it's really more of a like strange auditory art gallery than a traditional album. But check it out. I definitely enjoyed my time with it. I thought it was an interesting listen, and maybe you will too.
But yeah, if you enjoy this album, definitely check out the rest of the stuff on Wasabi Tapes Bandcamp. There's some interesting, weird, experimental stuff on there as well. And I'll see you guys next week for another review of some sort. Maybe. Well, probably. I do this every week. Peace.